I always thought the worst day of my marriage would be the day it ended, not the day I learned it had already died without me noticing. My name's Eric, and my wife, Melanie, was the kind of woman who could light up a room. We'd been married for 8 years, and until recently, I honestly believed we were solid. Sure, things had gotten busy. We were both working a lot, her managing a boutique downtown, me grinding away as a software consultant. But when we were together, it still felt like home. Or so I thought. It all started with a flickering TV. Our living room set, which had served us faithfully for almost a decade, decided to start showing every show with more static than picture. Melanie suggested we call a repair service instead of buying a new one, arguing we had already spent too much this month on a plumber and a surprise tax bill. So she arranged for someone to come by the following afternoon. That night, she was oddly excited. I chalked it up to relief that we wouldn't have to shell out for a new flat screen. She even kissed me longer than usual before bed, something that hadn't happened in weeks. I left for work the next morning with a spring in my step, thinking maybe we were turning a corner, getting back to the way we used to be. I didn't know I was walking straight into the biggest betrayal of my life. At lunchtime, I remembered I'd left my presentation notes at home. Cursing my forgetfulness, I decided to drive the 15 minutes back. Melanie's car was in the driveway, as expected, but I noticed a blue van parked behind it with Silver Star Electronics stenciled on the side. The repairman was already there. Great, I thought. I'd grab my folder and get out of their way. I opened the front door quietly so I wouldn't interrupt, but what I heard made my stomach twist. A deep male voice said, "You sure your husband won't be back for a while?" followed by Melanie's unmistakable giggle. I stood frozen in the entryway, the weight of what was happening crashing over me like a rogue wave. My legs moved on their own, carrying me down the hall until I could see them. There they were, Melanie leaning against the TV stand, wearing a robe she usually saved for date nights, and the repairman mid-30s, scruffy beard, wearing a tool belt, standing way too close. His hands were on her waist. She was smiling at him like I hadn't seen her smile at me in years. I stepped forward, and the floorboard creaked under my shoe. They both whipped around. Melanie's face drained of color, and the repairman took a cautious step back. "Eric," she gasped. "You're home early." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up, and my mind was trying to make sense of the pieces that wouldn't fit together. She moved toward me, hands out like I was a wild animal she needed to calm. "This isn't what it looks like," she said, the oldest lie in the book. But the guilty look in her eyes told me everything. The repairman stammered something about misunderstanding and just leaving, but I ignored him. I was locked on Melanie. The woman I'd pledged my life to. The woman who, only hours earlier, kissed me like she meant it. I felt like the world had gone silent around me. I couldn't hear the clock ticking, couldn't hear the traffic outside, couldn't hear the distant bark of our neighbor's dog. All I heard was the echo of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Eric, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "We need to talk." I wanted to scream. To throw something. But I couldn't. Instead, I walked past her, straight into our bedroom, and grabbed my presentation folder. When I turned to leave, she was standing in the hallway, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare pretend this was nothing," I said quietly, the words feeling like they'd been ripped from my chest. "Don't you dare." I walked past the repairman, who was staring at the floor like a schoolboy caught cheating. I slammed the front door behind me, got in my car, and just drove. I don't remember the first few miles. My mind was a haze of memories: our wedding day, our first apartment, the nights we stayed up late planning our future. How did we get here? I don't know how long I drove. I just remember the blur of exit signs and the low hum of the highway beneath my tires. At some point, instinct took over and I found myself parked at the lookout point where Melanie and I used to watch sunsets back when everything felt simple. The same place I asked her to marry me. Funny how places can go from sacred to haunted overnight. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. 37 missed calls. All from Melanie. I shut it off. I didn't need her voice right now, didn't want her explanations, her apologies, or her excuses. I spent the night at a motel on the edge of town. The sheets were stiff, and the air conditioning rattled like it was dying. But it was quiet, so quiet that I could finally think. My mind kept circling the same question: was it really just the TV repairman? Or had there been others? I thought about the little signs I'd brushed aside, the night she stayed late at work, the sudden shift in her perfume, how she'd started showering as soon as she got home. And how, whenever I'd reach for her in bed, she'd turn away with a polite excuse: tired, stressed, not in the mood. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I called in sick, then called a locksmith. A kind old man named Hank changed the locks on every door in the house before lunch. I packed Melanie's clothes into boxes and lined them neatly in the garage. By the time I finished, the place felt emptier than it ever had, like all the color had drained out. The sound of her car rolling into the driveway mid-afternoon felt like a gunshot. She stepped out cautiously, like she expected an ambush. I watched from the kitchen window as she tried her key in the front door and found it didn't work. When I opened the door, her eyes were red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Eric," she whispered, voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" I stepped aside and let her in. She glanced around the living room like it was foreign territory, like she could already sense the distance that had grown between us. "Why him?" I asked, my voice low but steady. Was it just about the excitement? The thrill? Tears welled up again, but I didn't feel sorry for her. "I don't know," she stammered. "It was stupid, and I hate myself for it. He was just attentive. He listened to me, complimented me, made me feel." "Made you feel what?" I snapped, louder than I intended. "Special? Wanted? Was I not enough?" She winced as if I'd slapped her. You are. But we stopped connecting. We drifted. And I didn't know how to fix it." I laughed bitterly. "So you thought bringing another man into our marriage would help?" She shook her head, eyes wild. "It wasn't like that. It just happened. One moment, he was fixing the TV, and the next." "Don't," I cut her off. "Don't reduce 8 years of marriage to it just happened." Silence settled like fog. I could feel her searching my face for any sign of softness. There was none left. Whatever had kept us tethered had snapped. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "Take your things. I've packed them. The boxes are in the garage." She stared at me, horror dawning. "No, Eric, please. Don't do this. We can go to counseling, we can." I shook my head. "It's too late. This isn't a crack we can patch. You broke us." She sank to her knees, sobbing. But the sound didn't move me. I felt like I was standing outside my own life, watching it collapse from a safe distance. After a while, she wiped her face, stood up, and shuffled to the garage. I watched her load the boxes into her car. There was no anger left in me, only a dull ache where love used to be. She climbed behind the wheel, hesitated, then looked back at me one last time. Our eyes met, but it felt like looking at a stranger. Then she drove away, the taillights shrinking until they were swallowed by the afternoon haze. I sat on the couch, staring at the repaired TV, now working perfectly. I thought about how I'd once believed fixing a broken screen could make everything better, that if I patched the picture, I'd patch us too. But as the afternoon sun shifted across the room, I realized some fractures run too deep. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork and hushed conversations with friends and family who didn't know what to say. Nights were the worst. I lay awake replaying memories I didn't trust anymore. Every sweet moment felt tainted, every laugh laced with lies I hadn't seen. And yet, somewhere in that darkness, I found slivers of clarity. I remembered the person I was before I became a husband who doubted every word, before I shrank myself trying to keep a love alive that was already dying. I started going on long walks, rediscovering the quiet joys I'd forgotten, the smell of rain on asphalt, the hush of dawn before the world wakes up. I called friends I hadn't seen in years, made plans that were just for me. One evening, I stood on the lookout point again. The same place we got engaged, now mine alone. The city lights sparkled below, indifferent to my heartbreak. For the first time since it all fell apart, I felt a flicker of peace. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I'd face it on my own terms. Melanie's betrayal would always be part of my story. But it wouldn't define me.